man is Micah chapter 7 verse 2. The good man is perished out of the earth, and there is none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net, that they may do evil. Say what? That they may do evil with both hands earnestly. The prince asketh, and the judge asketh for a reward. And the great man, he uttered his mischievous desire, so they wrap it up. Verse 4, the best of them is as a briar. The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. The day of thy watchman and thy visitation cometh now, shall be their perplexity. Trust ye not in a friend, put ye not confidence in a guide. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. Verse 6, it said, for the son dishonored the father, and the daughter riseth up against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. So, hey, this devil brings total chaos, and this is what you finna see. I don't know why I keep on doing that. Okay? So Micah opens by declaring that the righteous restraint has vanished, meaning the absence of accountability allows bloodshed to become procedural rather than exceptional. Hunting every man his brother with a net describes surveillance, coordinated takedown, and systems designed to trap rather than protect, which aligns perfectly with mass agents, unmarked vehicles, and broad targeting. Verses 3 exposes institutional corruption, where leadership, judiciary, and enforcement aligns not around justice, but around shared interests and self-preservation, calling the best of them briars. Men, even the most restrained actors, still cause harm, showing that reform from within the system is no longer possible at this stage. The day of visitation is not repentance, but exposure, where confusion and backlash erupt because the system can no longer manage the consequences of its own action. Verse 5 warns societal breakdown, where trust dissolves not only between the citizen and state, but among neighbors and families. Micah concludes by showing internal division is the final destabilizer, because the nation fractured inwardly cannot stand outwardly. Okay? So let's fair use under copyright statute of 1976. Let's get that again. Watch a couple more videos. Fair use under the copyright statute of 1976.
Fair use under the 1976 Copyright Act permits limited use of copyrighted material for things like criticism or research. It considers the purpose, the nature of the work, how much is used, and the effect.
Okay, there you go. Commercial versus non-profit nature of the work, amount used, in the market effect, creating a flexible balancing test rather than strict numerical rules. Okay, here go the rest of it right here. Okay. So I'm not getting paid for this strictly for educational purposes. So fair use, fair use, fair use. Okay, let's go. Let's go into this one right here.
"48 Barriers" is a family-owned company, started.
I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little. I'll take you out of the. In fact, I'll let the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen.
For the first time since World War II, a U.S. president is openly refusing to rule out military force against a NATO ally. Not Russia, not China, not some rogue state halfway across the world. A NATO ally. An island with 56,000 people who woke up one morning to discover their homeland was being called unacceptable unless owned by the United States. And the person making that declaration, the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Greenland is very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is, there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland.
Imagine a diplomatic meeting at the highest levels of government. The Vice President, the Secretary of State, foreign ministers of allied nations, a closed-door session meant to resolve tensions, find common ground, avoid escalation. Now imagine that meeting ending, not just in disagreement, but in what diplomats are calling a fundamental disagreement that threatens the very foundation of Western security. No handshake photo op, no joint statement, no progress, just silence, tension, and the unmistakable reality that something has gone terribly wrong. That meeting happened, and what followed was a cascade of statements, threats, and ultimatums that have left European capitals scrambling, NATO officials alarmed, and geopolitical analysts asking a question nobody thought they'd have to ask in 2025. Is the United States seriously considering taking territory from an ally by force?
I don't think troops in Europe impact the president's decision-making process, nor does it impact his goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all.
But President Trump has declared that the United States needs Greenland and that anything less than total control is unacceptable. But here,
yeah, they're incredibly concerned, and I think the latest language used by President Trump is going to be even more chilling. Everyone here has been telling us this meeting with the Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers, with J.D. Vance, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio today is a big meeting. It is a big deal. It has everyone here worried. You know, when you speak to people here, it is very clear. No one wants to be part of the United States. Perhaps there are divisions on the independent side of how quickly the country should move to independence, which is a sort of an overwhelming view. But the Prime Minister has made, as you said, made very, very clear.
But here's the problem. The Prime Minister of Greenland has made it clear they do not want to be part of the United States. The government of Denmark, which Greenland is part of, has categorically rejected the idea. And yet Trump isn't backing down. He's doubling down. He's using language that leaves no room for compromise, no space for negotiation, and no acknowledgement that the people of Greenland might have a say in their own future.
Hey, so you see, these devils, man, they going, he bringing it. Let's go to this one right here. It said once a nation deploys military resources against civilian unrest while simultaneously expanding federal enforcement, it has entered the realms of scripture, of the scriptures called siege conditions. And that's what he's trying to do in Greenland. It said even if tanks are not yet on the street, the Most High consistently uses eternal oppressions as a measuring rod, because the way of nations treats its own people reveals what spirit governs it. When leaders frame repression as protection and violence as a necessity, they are not preventing chaos, but summoning it. Scripture teaches that fear-driven obedience is short-lived, and once it breaks violently. This is why the next phase of is calm, but escalation, confusion, and competing authorities. See, let's go to Luke chapter 21, verse 25 and 26. It said, and there shall be seized. Salafi, it said, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the water roaring. Hey, we just had another blood moon. About 3 days ago. I don't know where it was at, but I just watched the news footage, and so we just had another blood moon. Okay, men's heart failing. Say what? Men's heart failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So Yahushua is not only describing natural signs, but political and social upheavals. See, when nations experience distress without solution, perplexity means leadership confusion, conflicting orders, emergencies, powers, and reactive decision making, which is exactly what we are seeing in 2026. The roaring sea represent uncontrollable masses, unrest, protest, migration, and backlash. Movements that cannot manage through force alone. See, men's heart failing for fear is psychological collapse of confidence, where people no longer believe the system can protect them. This fear spreads upward as well, because authorities begin acting preemptively rather than wisely. The powers of heaven being shaken means the invisible structures of authority are being judged, not just a visible institution. This confirms that what we are seeing is not a policy failure, but a prophetic shaking. See, so the final landing and how it plays out scripturally, this phase leading to economic pressures, expand enforcement, selective justice, and loss of international credibility, not restoration. America does not collapse overnight. It bleeds legitimacy until force is all it has left. So once it happened, Revelation 18 is already in motion. So I got what I want to do here. I want to go here for a minute. Let me see here. I got some video that I had the other day that I was going to use. We're going to play them now. I might as well go and bring them forth. See, this is what we seeing. So let's watch some videos. I'm gonna play, go back and forth.
Low down payments start at carhop.com.
For the ones who rise to every challenge, there's Grainger. For the ones who get it done.
TaxAct is designed to help you get your taxes done. Let's get them over with.
There's a pattern in history that has destroyed 3 global superpowers in the last 500 years. And right now in 2025, the United States is following that exact same pattern stage by stage, decision by decision, almost like we're reading from the same script that led to catastrophe every single time before. In 1590, Spain was the richest empire on earth. They controlled half the world's gold and silver. Their military dominated Europe. Their currency was accepted everywhere. Within 80 years, they were bankrupt, a second-rate power that never recovered. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun never set on British territory. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. The currency collapsed. They became America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union was the other superpower. Nuclear weapons, global influence, satellites spanning the globe. It ceased to exist in 900 days, not from war, but from economic implosion. 3 times. 3 superpowers. 3 complete collapses, all following the exact same sequence. And here's what should terrify you. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. We're not approaching the pattern. We're deep inside it. This is the story of how empires die, why they always think they're different, and why the math says that the United States is next. And it's happening faster than anyone wants to admit. Before we go through the pattern, you need to understand what imperial collapse actually looks like. Not in textbooks, but in practice. What it means when a superpower dies. Imperial collapse doesn't start with invasion or military defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire extends beyond its ability to maintain itself. Military bases in 150 countries, wars on multiple fronts, promises it cannot keep, debts it cannot repay. At first, the decline is invisible. The currency still works, the military still wins battles, the government still makes promises. But beneath the surface, the foundation is cracking, resources are misallocated, productive capacity shrinks, the best and brightest people leave, and then comes the acceleration. Allies start hedging, enemies test boundaries, trade partners seek alternatives, the reserve currency status erodes, and suddenly the advantages that made you powerful become vulnerabilities. Your currency, once demanded by everyone, comes flooding back home. Your military spread across the world becomes unsustainable. Your promises, once guaranteed by strength, become empty words. That's not theoretical. That's what happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it happened because they made exactly the same decisions that America is making now. They believed their power was permanent. They overextended militarily. They debased their currency, and they refused to accept reality until collapse was already underway. Let's look at how it actually happened 3 times the exact same way. Let's start with the first global empire, Spain, from the 1500s to the 1600s. After Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, Spain became the first true world power. They conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, seized control of the richest gold and silver mines ever discovered. By 1550, Spanish ships were bringing home 200 tons of silver per year. By 1600, over 400 tons annually. Spain controlled the money supply of Europe. The Spanish reals was the global reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver, and this is where the pattern begins with a country that controls the money of the world and believes that it makes them invincible. King Philip II, who ruled from 1556 to 1598, had more money than any monarch in history, and he spent it on empire. Stage 1 is military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere, simultaneously against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England's navy, wars in the Philippines and wars in the Americas. By 1580, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was staggering. Half of Spain's revenue went to the military, and still, it wasn't enough. Stage 2 is currency debasement. The Spanish crown couldn't pay its bills with taxes alone, so they did what every failing empire does. They debased the currency. They started mixing copper into silver coins. A coin that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% 50% copper, then 75% copper. The face value stayed the same, but the real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained barely any silver. Merchants stopped accepting them at face value. Inflation exploded. Stage 3 is debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly from Italian bankers, from German bankers, from anyone who would lend. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy. They defaulted on their debts, restructured, and kept borrowing. They declared bankruptcy again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Each time they promised reforms. Each time they went right back to borrowing and spending. Stage 4 is loss of productive capacity. Here's what people don't understand about Spain's collapse. They had all the gold and silver in the world, and it destroyed them, because when you have unlimited money, you stop producing. Why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you can buy them? Why innovate when you can just spend? Spanish nobility considered every work beneath them. As a result, manufacturing declined and agriculture stagnated. All the wealth flowed to importing goods from other countries. The gold and silver that came from the Americas went straight back out to pay for French wine, Italian silk, and Dutch goods. Spain became a conduit. Wealth flowed through them, but none of it stayed. By 1600, Spain was producing almost nothing. They were entirely dependent on imports, entirely dependent on silver to pay for everything. And when the silver mines began to deplete, when production dropped, the entire system collapsed. Stage 5 is social decay. With a failing economy, crime exploded. Beggars filled the streets of Madrid. Productive citizens immigrated. The best minds left for France, England, and the Netherlands. The countries that were building, creating, and growing. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests. No one was creating wealth. Everyone was consuming it. By 1640, Spain lost Portugal. By 1650, they lost the Netherlands, their richest territory. And by 1700, the Spanish Empire was a shell, still large on paper, but economically dead. They went from the world's superpower to a secondary power in less than a century, and they never recovered. Spain today is a regional European country, pleasant, cultured, but irrelevant on the world stage. The descendants of the conquistadors are a tourist destination. That's what imperial collapse looks like. Let's jump forward 300 years. It's Britain in the 1900s, the empire where the sun never set. At its peak, Britain controlled 25% of the world's land surface, 400 million subjects. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Every major trade contract was denominated in pounds. Every central bank held British bonds. London was the financial centre of the world. And just like Spain 300 years earlier, they believed it was permanent, but they were already following the pattern. Stage 1, the military overextension. By 1900, Britain had military commitments everywhere. India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. They had to defend territory on 6 continents. The cost was enormous. And when World War I started in 1914, Britain faced a choice: stay neutral and let Europe destroy itself, or jump in and bankrupt the empire to win. They chose to fight. World War I cost Britain over $40 billion. That's $1 trillion in today's money. They borrowed from everyone, mostly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions. The creditor had become the debtor, but they'd won the war. They kept the empire. They thought they could rebuild, but they were wrong. Stage 2, currency debasement. The pound sterling was supposed to be backed by gold, but the war had drained Britain's gold reserves. They'd shipped gold to America to pay for weapons, food, supplies. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves were half what they had been in 1914, but they tried to maintain the pound's value anyway. They went back on the gold standard at the pre-war rate in 1925. The problem was that the pound was overvalued. British exports became too expensive. Manufacturing declined, unemployment rose, and the government had to keep interest rates high to defend the currency. This destroyed the domestic economy. By 1931, they couldn't hold it anymore. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Britain never recovered from World War I debt, and then World War II started. Another $120 billion in costs, more borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada over $30 billion more than Britain's entire GDP. The war was won, but the empire was finished. They couldn't defend it anymore, couldn't afford it, couldn't maintain it. Stage 4, the loss of empire. In 1947, Britain gave up India, the crown jewel, and the source of wealth for 200 years gone. Over the next 20 years, they lost everything: Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. Stage 5, the currency collapse. The pound kept falling. In 1940, £1 equaled $403. By 1950, $280. By 1970, $240. By 1980, £2 equaled equaled 30, and today it's fallen to £27. The global reserve currency became a regional currency. Britain tried to maintain permanent seat on the UN Security Council, nuclear weapons, special relationship with America. But everyone knew the truth. They were a former power, a museum of what used to be great. The empire was gone and it never came back. Now let's look at the most recent example, the Soviet Union, which ruled from 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the USSR emerged as a superpower. They had nuclear weapons, massive military control over Eastern Europe, satellites in space, and they believed they were the future, and communism would bury capitalism and the Soviet model would dominate. And today, it's fallen to £27. The global reserve currency became a regional currency.
Okay, let's hit some scriptures real quick. Close this segment off. So right here, let's go to Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 8. It said, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land of the city and all that therein. So empires that live by extraction rather than production always confuse flow with ownership. When wealth is imported instead of created, a nation becomes a vessel, not a foundation. So Yahweh Shai established judgment on powers that enrich themselves through plunder. The prophets showed that borrower glory always demand repayment with violence. So this precept that I just brought forth establishes a divine economic law. Stolen wealth reverses ownership in time, see? So Spain spoiled nations through conquest and silver extraction and not sustainable dominion. Britain spoiled nations through trade monopolies, debt system, and military enforcement. So Yahweh Shai declared that exploitation creates a future creditor class. The remnant represent rising productive nations that inherit collapsed empires. Violence here includes economic violence, dependency, inflation, and forced trade. This explains why empires fall suddenly once extraction exceeds creation, see? So military dominance often disguises internal weakness until collapse is unavoidable. When defense spending replaces reproductive labor and the empire begins eating itself, see? And that's what we seeing, man. America don't produce anything no more. You know, thanks to all them presidents before them start making them backroom deals and shipping all them jobs off overseas and shit. You know, I know a couple presidents done did that in my time. While Bill Clinton, with that, what was it, NAFTA? I don't want to call him that. I think it was the NAFTA deal that he did. And I think it was before him, I think it was Bush, the first Bush, so on and so forth, man, But hey, at the end of the day, we know it's the elites doing all this here. They the one control all this thing. They control the whole thing, the international banking family. As Elder Apostle Gabar said, you gotta come to the root. As a matter of fact, when we start the second phase of this video, that's where we're gonna go into his video. I'm gonna land back off some of his work. Him and Elder Apostle Ramla. Okay, so So when defense spending replaces productive labor, the empire begins eating itself. Yahweh Hashem, Yahushua never ordained endless occupation as righteousness. The prophet warned that swords stretched too far eventually break. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 16, it said, "Woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child and thy princes eat in the morning." So a child king represents immaturity in governance, not age alone. It says Spain and Britain both ruled vast territories without discipline and restraint. Princes eating in the morning showed indulgence before responsibility. Resources were consumed before stability was secured. Military overextension drained treasuries, while enemies multiplied. We seen the same thing happen here in America, and we're gonna go into that too. Cause the video gonna go into that too, cause that's what it was leading up to, showing how kingdoms fall. So it said Yahweh Hashem, Yahushua labeled this condition a woe. That means death and destruction, not a misfortune. So this is the beginning of irreversible decline, see? So it's a dependency replaces sovereignty when nations abandon self-sufficiency. Imports become lifeline instead of supplements. Yahweh Hashem, Yahushua measure nations by what they produce, not what they possess. Trade imbalance is a silent curse before public collapse. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, it said, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is the servant to the lender." So Spain borrowed prosperity by importing finished goods. Britain borrowed dominance by maintaining global debt obligation. Silver and pounds became tools of servitude, not strength. Once production stopped, currency becomes a leash. Creditors dictate terms when innovation ceases. So Yahweh Hashem, Yahushua called this servitude, not partnership. So empires fall when they can no longer pay their master.